Hello, welcome back to BLENDERSUSHI Live Noding. In this episode, we're gonna take a look at the creation of this setup that I'm about to show you. So if I just run the playback, you can see there are 10 cubes here, and then if I just run the playback, you can see each one of them is kind of growing, and they're growing in different pace. You might wonder, how is this possible, right? This is like only 250 frame. Let me make it like 10,000 frame, for example. um, yeah, and they're just gonna continue growing, and um, it stops a little bit, but it should generally just keep going and never ending. That's because this is first of all, this is procedural. There's a setup behind it, as you already know. And in this case, I'm using Sverchok, but you can also achieve this using animation nodes. In this live noding video, I will try to break it down to the very component. If you are like a long-time programmer and you know some scripting and coding, you understand the programming concept, and you are familiar with Python, you might think this is like super easy, super basic stuff. But if you are, on the other hand, if you are like a total beginner in programming, and you want to improve your Python, and you want to learn a bit of programming, and you want to do it in Blender, you can kind of do that. It's a kind of thing that something that I would like to teach you a little bit. I'm not actually a programmer myself. I learned programming in many different ways. I use a program called processing, and now I'm switching to Blender and kind of focusing on more on Python, and kind of I'm kind of like in between, I guess. I'm not like a developer yet, but I like to make some tools, and I like to make useful tools. So the setup itself for this thing is very simple. It's basically if I explain it with a human language, um, this box they have an array modifier, right? And with array modifier, we can control the count, and this number can control the height of this cube, sort of. But I'm using some kind of node setup here, and they are all procedural. They are controlling these 10 cubes. I can make more, but that's another story. I'm controlling each, and I'm controlling the count number of this array using this object ID setup. This is Sverchok accessing object attributes. But the number itself, actually, if I go back, this is, first of all, here there's a, I'm generating a random number. Okay, you can see as I'm scrubbing in the timeline, there's this random number being generated, 5033, whatever. This is I'm using random number generator. Okay, it has a seed value that I can change to get a different result. But basically, this one node is generating a new value every frame. That's first. And the next one, I'm doing the counting here. And for the counting, this is where I'm using Sverchok SN Lite. This is Sverchok script node Lite version, where I'm describing here the input and the output of the numbers that's gonna go in and being processed, and the output number is actually, I have this the total number. This is, you can see number 8 here. This is the total number of a random number up there, while this guy, the other one, is doing the counting of the number. I'm actually specifying to give a random number between 0 and 10 here. So with the output, I'm getting, sometimes I do get 10, so this is probably a random number between low value of 0 and high value of 10. I can specify it. Okay, so give it a low value of 5 and high value of 10 or something. We're gonna get a different result. You see here. So there's a lot of interesting thing that you can do, even though you're only know the basics. But if you know the basic really well, and that's actually when you can improve in terms of programming concept. So there's a lot here, and I'm using Sverchok. I could actually use animation nodes. I might do another live noding video of the same exact thing but using animation nodes. Before I jump into the script node and explaining the whole thing, this is actually, like I said, this is still pretty basics, but you can understand there's a lot of kind of programming concept here. So you start with a list of numbers. In this case, just random numbers, but you might have your own data of numbers. And what I did here is just using one of the Python built-in functions. Just do the counting of the numbers. So whatever numbers here, count how many number 7 you have, how many number 5, how many 6, 8, and so on, and just pipe that values into this array cube. So it's super basic stuff, but I want to start from very scratch. Actually, I should probably separate this into a few videos, but I don't want to do too much of the basics. Let's say I'll just do it anyway. I'm gonna use Sverchok. Can use animation nodes, but Sverchok can be simple as well. The most basic thing you want to do in programming is to do math. Okay, to do a calculations. You can have a single numbers. Single numbers not that useful, but if, you can generate that numbers. You can have 2 numbers, or you can have 10 numbers, and whatever, right? You can do math or calculations using Sverchok very easily. Let's say you have a number, okay? But the number itself, okay, in programming you have all kind of types of number. You have integer, which is sometimes shortened as int, and integer is a full number, so it can be 1, 10, -5, 1000, whatever. And then you have float. Sometimes they actually call it float. Float is a floating number. So you have 0.5, maybe 0.01. Basically, it's a fractional number. And I think we are fine with those 2 numbers. Let's do a calculation in Sverchok. So in order to create a numbers, you create a node. Maybe I'm gonna call this a Sverchok basic programming. I don't know if this is really a programming, but I guess that's a kind of doing it. So we have a float. We have a node here that generate a floating numbers. Okay, we actually have integer as well that will generate a full number. You can do math very easily. Like here you have all the math functions that you can think of. This is like the most used functions: addition, subtractions, multiplications, and then this is what do you call it? Division, and all others. Let's start with just doing the addition. So you don't actually need to use this nodes to provide the input, because this guy already have it for you. For the result, stethoscope node can be used to show the result. So let's say here we have 2 and 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. And you can see it is bracketing, but look at the value inside. You can just make changes ever so easily. So you get the result, any value, and you get the output here. Okay, that's the most basic thing, but you can also provide your own input. So this is value A and value B, and just plus them together, add them together. You can also do a piggyback and keep on adding numbers as you please. This is very easy. If you were to do it using programming language, and in Blender we have Python, of course, you can do additions very easily, like 200 plus 100 is 300. You can just do it like that and not storing it on any variables. But if you're storing it on a variable, like I call A is maybe equal 5 and B is equal 10, A plus B equal 15. But you can create a new variable and call it a total, or call it sum. A plus B, sum is equal 15, and sum multiplied by 10, you get 150. Yeah, you know, this is the most basic thing you can do in programming. Just doing some math calculations and numbers, just like a normal calculator. Okay, calculator. Oh, it's interesting. It's frozen a little bit. Okay. 5 plus 5 equal 10. 10 plus 5 equal 15. You can do that in a Spotlight as well. But you can do a lot more, of course, in if you're using Python, and you are using nodes like this in Sverchok. What's something that's interesting is if you start using like a number generator, like random number generator, for example. Here you have a nodes. You don't know what it does, but if you use a stethoscope, you can, oh okay, you can see this one, you kind of guess. This one generates a random number generator. So the result can, the output can be integer or float. See, float is like a fractional values, and the size is really how many random value you are generating. The seed randomize the generation. So this is quite an you can call it a simple node, a very useful node, because to generate something like this using Python, for example, it's not always too simple. A simpler node will be like a range integer and range float. So this guy have more options, okay, and it will generate numbers as well. Let's say for range float, we can say, okay, hey Sverchok, hey Blender, creates this create a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Create a number between 0 and 5 with a step of 1, and you get this, and you can change the stepping value, maybe 0.25, so you have more numbers if you're doing it like that, or 0.1, and of course more numbers. I like the count one because you can say, okay, make a 5 numbers between 0 and 5. This is kind of nice because it's like just like a Python own functions. It's called range. You can say create a in this case I'm typing range between 0 and 5, and the result is it's not giving any result yet because I think we need to print it out. No, I think we need to list it. So it's a yeah, print a list of numbers range between 0 and 5. You can also specify the stepping value. Oops. Floating objects cannot be interpreted as integer. Oh, okay. Print list of number range between 0 and to 5.0 and float cannot be interpreted as integer. Float object cannot be interpreted as integer. Maybe I'm not using the function right, but anyway, this is printing the list range of number between 0 and 5. The thing with a programming language is that you have to know, you have to type it correctly. You have to type the function correctly to get the right output, right? You made a mistake, and if you're not using the function the right way, it will fail right away, and there is no mercy. But it still tell you what's going on. Maybe you need to read the documentation. So that's with the programming, and eventually you will learn that. But if you are using nodes, it's kind of leverage. It makes things a little bit easier for you, so you don't need to worry too much about typing the wrong functions. This is node is very I call it very artist friendly. So this one generate numbers. Let's keep it simple. Just make like a 10 numbers here. Start from 0 and step of 1, and we have this 10 number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, we are doing it in nodes. And the nice thing about this, of course, you can just do addition, for example. So you have this list of value, and you're assigning, you add them together using a function's addition, and you get a result 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, blah blah blah, because you're adding this value with 5, and you can change this value and it will update accordingly. So that's the nice thing about this. It's very important. If you actually provide this another random value and plug in together, you will see we get a result as well. This is a list of value here and a list of random value here, and just add them together and you get a result. And this is the beginning of something. You'll start to see, okay, this is actually really powerful, and it's still pretty easy, right? You have this random value and you have this. Okay, what can we do with this? Maybe you have 10 objects in the scene. Let's say you have this master, and then this is the cube 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I always like to have this concept. So you have this master, and you have this instance of objects in the scene already for you that you can work with. So we have 10 objects here that we're gonna work on, okay, in Sverchok. With these 10 objects, we can scale it in the z-axis, for example, obviously, and we can randomize the z-axis, whatever. So we want to, let's say we want to transfer all these numbers into these 10 cubes. Is it gonna be easy? It's gonna be hard. It's actually pretty easy. I'm gonna show you. So this is 10 objects. You can group it, whatever, but I'm gonna just use the objects in MK2. I'm gonna get the selection, okay? 10 cubes, 10 blocks. I'm gonna bring it into Sverchok, and I want to control the scaling of the Z using Sverchok. The way to do it, one way to one way to do it is to use the object set nk2. So for each and every object, remember in Sverchok we are doing it on all the objects at the same time, so remember that. We're not gonna do anything with the locations yet, but we can do something with the scaling. So objects and scale. Remember that for the scale, be careful here. Scale is a 3 value, okay? X, Y, and Z. X, Y, Z, and you can adjust it whatever you want. This is a Euler. This is a 3 value. So you can't just plug in a single value. It's gonna complain. It becomes red. It's error. Okay. You can see the error message. Expecting something. It should say like, okay, I'm actually expecting a 3 value, not a single value. So we need to provide a vector. Vector in is a 3 value, plug into that guy. Now 10 objects disappear. Why? Because the scaling is 0 by default. Now if I set it to 1, now we have all the objects back to their original size, and we can control the Z scaling right here. Okay, knowing that and have this thing ready, we can just pipe in the value there. Sometimes I call the word stuffing value. Stuff maybe sounds a little bit rude, but this is more like a passing. A better word is passing data. So you can pass this. You can pass like a random value if you want a random number generator. You can use integer or float, whatever you like. Plug into that guy. It will work right away. I did it. I think I did this many times already in previous live noding. Whether it's like just something I want to do it really quickly to show you. You can randomize the seed to get a different value and controlling the low value and the high value. You already know that, I think, by now, and you can actually have less or more numbers. So if I have only 5 numbers, I think only 5. Actually, in this case, it cleverly repeats the number, so don't worry about that for now. Instead of just random number, we can also provide our own value here, which is let's say we are using the range integer and plug into that guy, and you see we get this. This is the value here. Actually, this is the value this guy have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a value that goes up. Okay, linearly goes up, adding 1 each time. You can change the stepping, and that will also give you like a different result. It's pretty obvious, okay, but it's easier when you actually put them together and you can see the result in 3D, because Blender is of course a 3D apps. So this is why I like Blender so much, because you can see like a result in 3D. You can see a result right away. You can change all these numbers. It's not so abstract anymore. Now we have this number that's kind of growing, and we have this random number, and we can add them together, and the result you can just pipe into this guy, and so we have this. So now we have value that goes from 1 maybe, and a stepping of 1 that's kind of growing, and we also have this random number, and we can mix them together. Integer low, integer high. You can do a lot here. Change it to float, and you get a more finer value. Make sure you provide the correct numbers. Floating the minimum number and the maximum number here. You can randomize the seed. You can change the size. Okay, this is the basic. So basically, you can work with multiple numbers. You can pass the numbers and get an output. Okay, So that's the basics. Now we want to go back to what we started with. This thing, the counting matters. In here, I'm using something called a script node. And like I said, we have script node in Sverchok and also in animation nodes. We can do the same thing using any of whichever you want to use with. And also another thing, important thing is like you can do this in many different ways. The script I have here perhaps it's not the most ideal, it's perhaps not the best solutions. Perhaps there's a better, more elegant script. That's another thing. So you can do this in many different ways. Even the node stuff, maybe we don't need to use script node, we can just use nodes, but in this case I'm using script node because why? Because I want to kind of starting to get into more intermediate and just a little bit more interesting stuff that you can do if you know programming better. Okay, so in this case, like I said, we have a random number here. We generate random numbers. We can generate as many numbers as we want. We can have 1000 frames, 10 frames, 100 frames, million frames, doesn't matter. This program will work, okay? And whether you're using just like a bar here, or you can change it into sphere and changing the size or changing the rotations, whatever, it will just work. Because why? Because we are controlling all these numbers. Probably in here the hardest part is this script nodes of Sverchok. This is something that I'm still learning and get used to. The node is called script node, but it's scripted node light. It's or I call it SN light. And this guy looks like this if you open it, just pointing into a text. And then there's this button that you can click on it, and it will actually do something. It will create the nodes for you, and if you provide the right script, that actually will create a node very quickly. You get this kind of nodes. In this case, I'm specifying for the input we want this. Okay, there are two inputs, and for the output there's this output numbers and the total numbers. The total number actually give the length of the number being generated here. For the length, we actually have a list length node here that can give you the same result. So whatever numbers or list of number being generated here, just give me a result. And let's use this stethoscope node. Just output it. My computer is a bit slow at the moment, I don't know why. Maybe it's doing something in the background. So currently we have 66 value because we are at frame 66. Maybe reduce it. Okay, now I don't know, is it calculating or something? Sorry, just a little bit slow. But anyway, so the script node, if you provide it with the right text, with the right program, it will be really powerful. Currently, this is what it does. Is just something really simple. In here, I'm basically specifying create an empty list and call it blah. And for every value in the number, for every value in a range, max number. And here I'm saying max number 0. Oh, okay, because the max number is this value I'm specifying. So for every value in a range of number between 0 and 10, do a counting. So basically, um, this will do the counting of all these random numbers being generated on the fly. So if I have like a 100 value or 1000 value, it will count it and will give the result. And with that result, doing the counting, pipe that numbers and output it into our cube. Okay, here, over here. So supposedly I don't give like a too big of number. I just give it like 10 because we only have 10 cubes here. So now everything works, and then as the random number continuously being generated, it keeps doing the counting every frame, and the result will be piped into this cube. You can see this is the actual number is actually here, and this is the programming that do the hard job for us, and it will just keep doing the counting. In fact, you can give your own numbers here. It can be numbers, or it can also be like a text. Let's say you are doing accounting, right? You have 10 objects. You imagine this is I'm gonna do a drawing, maybe make it easy. This is doing a playback or something. Okay. Doesn't let me do the drawing. Just imagine this is like you doing accounting. Okay, you have a box full of maybe baby chicken. Okay, one box, there are 1000 of baby chicken. Okay, 1000 baby chicken, and they're all in different color, red, blue, yellow, whatever. And you have maybe you have 5 colors. Okay, and you have to do the counting of the chicken. You take the chicken one by one and move it into another box, and then you kind of, okay, this is red chicken, you write down red. Next chicken, yellow. Next chicken, green. And you keep doing that for 1000 chickens, and you end up with a list of text like red, green, blue. And then with this like list, you can actually using this setup right here and do the counting. You're gonna end up with another list. So there are 10 different colors, and for each color you already make a counting. And if you're doing it by paper, you might need to do another counting. Okay, red, and then you make like a check mark, and then do a scratch, and then you keep counting until you're done with 1000 chicken. If you're doing it using program like this, it becomes super simple. And in fact, if you're like you have like an advanced computer, and the computer can look at the box, and then, okay, in a snap it can tell you, okay, we have 55 red chickens, we have 180 green chicken, we have 778 yellow chicken, and so on and so on. It will tell you at a glance. Okay, so suddenly you have okay, that with that kind of system, suddenly everything becomes so simple. It makes sense. In this case, we only have like this is like the basic setup. Same idea, but much simpler. So generate random numbers, calculate how many numbers we have for each of the numbers of each of different numbers. Okay, like and the number shouldn't repeat. Maybe I can improve this and make it into exactly what I'm talking about, like a red chicken, yellow chicken. If we bring it into like a computer graphic environment, let's say we have an image like a pixel art, maybe pixel art, 16 by 16 pixel art. 16 by 16, you have 256 pixels. Okay, 256 pixels. Now you tell computer, okay, tell me how many red we have. And red is made up of RGB value: red, green, blue. Red being a value of 1, green 0, blue 0. So that's a red value. And you can ask computer, how many red value do we have in this pixel art? And the computer will tell you in a second or less than a second, right away. And you can actually do something with that. And this is kind of the basic concept in this exercise. I hope that's pretty clear. If you're like the beginner of programming, I think that's the first problem you need to understand. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. Actually, it's pretty clear. If you have any question, feedback, suggestion, if you're like a more experienced programmers and you want to give me suggestion, hey, you can also explain this in this kind of way. I'll take that. I'll try to do that as well. If we bring it into a 3D environment like Blender, this is where you can use script or you can use nodes to ask Blender, hey Blender, how many camera do I have in the scene? How many lamp do I have in the scene? How many monkeys? How many cubes object do we have in the scene? If we name each object properly, like monkey is called monkey 1, 2, 3. Maybe they randomly name like monkey A, monkey B. We can kind of still filter them by name, so we can group them. Okay, monkey, all the monkey goes into this spot, and then all the cubes goes into this spot, all the cones goes into this spot, torus somewhere else, and so on and so on. Yeah, and you can ask Blender, Blender, how many monkey objects do we have in the scene? You can do that really easily using Python, if you are familiar with Python, or you can also using nodes. So there's a lot of applications with a counting. So that's actually the concept I want to kind of teach here, kind of explain counting. Such a simple function, but you can do it in many different ways. And yeah, I guess that's pretty clear. Maybe in the next video I will do the same thing using animation nodes, and I'll do it from scratch. The reason I'm using Sverchok is because of this ability to work with multiple numbers at the same time. In animation nodes you need to use loop, and loop is a concept that can be harder for beginners, but maybe once you understand loop, it's kind of okay, it's actually easier. But it's a very, very important. Once you're dealing with multiple numbers, list of numbers and array, you kind of want to move to Sverchok. It depends when, because animation nodes can handle some multiple numbers as well. So I kind of doing both because they both have interesting solutions and way of thinking. Okay, that's a long lecture, long live noding, but I think I kind of explained the problem and the solutions and the whole concept quite clearly. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you in the next video.